Okay, before we were so rudely interrupted by my camera's battery dying, we were talking about the Louisiana Purchase. Most people are ecstatic. Most people are very excited about the whole Louisiana Purchase. All except for the New England Federalists. This means all the land from New Orleans all the way up to Canada. Okay, it will double the size of our country. The Federalists didn't mind taking New Orleans by force. That was not outside the question. However, they don't like the fact of Jefferson having access to all that land that he could chop up to become states. Because here's the problem for the New England Federalists. They would lose clout. They would lose power. The New England states are the smaller states. The place they had the most clout was in the Senate, because each state has the same number of senators. And so regardless of the population of the state, the small states like New Hampshire would still have the same kind of political power as the big states like Virginia. However, if Thomas Jefferson gets his hand on all that extra land, he'll start chopping it up and giving it to people, and that Louisiana territory would become filled with states. That means the people in New England would lose their political clout. So they oppose the idea. Jefferson also had a problem as far as this land is concerned. He liked the idea because he wanted land for independent farmers, a true source of American freedom. But his little problem was this little piece of paper called the Constitution. You guys have read the Constitution? Do you remember where in the Constitution it says one of the powers of the president is to be able to purchase land to double the size of the country? That's right. You didn't read that in there because it's not there. Jefferson realized at this point he might have to try to amend the Constitution in order to make that one of his powers. However, the problem for Jefferson is the fact that this could be a short-time offer. It may be in a very short time that Napoleon no longer needs our money, or that Napoleon is no longer willing to go with 15 million. There's all kinds of things. And it could take forever. And then the smaller states, those New England Federalists, would be able to block an amendment to the Constitution. Well, apparently trying to amend the Constitution to make it part of the president's power to purchase land isn't going to work. And then one of Jefferson's advisors said, well, what about this? Part of the president's responsibilities is to be the chief ambassador and negotiator of treaties. So what if the United States made a treaty of friendship with France? A treaty of friendship in which we bestowed a gift, no strings attached, upon the French people of $15 million. And then the French people, in a reciprocal form of gesture of friendship, would bestow upon the United States of America, with no strings attached, all land adjacent to our current territories. That way, the only thing that would have to happen is the treaty would have to get ratified, and Jefferson would be able to purchase the land. So, which plan do you think we're going to go with? That's right. We're going to go with the second plan. Question is, do you think it was a rationalization on Jefferson's part? Or do you think he found a loophole that he was able to use to his advantage? Just like they had been complaining about Hamilton in previous sections. Well, Jefferson's ecstatic. Now, keep in mind this idea. England and France are at war. And I don't think the text stresses this enough. England and France are at war, and we are going to just hand the French $15 million while they're at war with the English. What do you think the English are going to think about our actions? Hold that thought. Hold that thought. Now, in late 1803, the American Army takes official control of Louisiana Territory. The United States was now 828,000 square miles larger than it was the day before. But Jefferson was an eager beaver. He, in early 1803, he gets permission from the Congress for a clandestine spy mission into what at that point was called Spanish territory. They're going to go into Louisiana Territory. This expedition will be led by Meriwether Lewis. His personal secretary is going to lead this trip. Two primary purposes. The first scientific, the second military and commercial. Jefferson wanted the scientific expedition. He wanted to identify and discover new Indian cultures. He wanted to get plant and animal specimens that we had yet previously undiscovered in the eastern part of the United States. He wants to chart the geography of the West and to find interesting and unique items. Congress has more military and commercial aspects in mind. They want to scout locations for bases. They want to try to open the fur trade like the British had with these folks. And they want to locate, if possible, that elusive Northwest Passage that would be able to take them to Asia. It's not there, but they're going to look for it anyway. So, Lewis is going to pick William Clark to go with him. The two of them select 45 men to go on this expedition, each one with very particular skills. Riflemen, hunters, fishermen, interpreters, gunsmith, a cook, and a 30-year-old slave named York, who belongs to Clark. In 1804, they stop off for the winter at a Mandan village. In this village, they stay there for the winter to prepare to go off on their trip. Now, you can see from the map, if you download the PowerPoint, they left St. Louis and traveled the Missouri River all the way up to the place where they established their winter quarters in 1804, 1805. And then from here, they make their trip, finding routes through the Rocky Mountains and going all the way through the Oregon Territory to the coast. They stop for winter quarters again, 1805, 1806, and then the next spring they turn around and head back. Now, on this back trip, they split up. Some people believe because they couldn't stand being around each other anymore. I would think that Meriwether Lewis wanted more samples and more opportunity to discover things, and if they're all clumped together, they only get one thin groupie. They meet back at the Mandan village and then make their way back to St. Louis. This was an exceptional trip. As a matter of fact, many of the things discovered about the cultures will form part of the basis for the Museum of Natural History, which is to come later in Washington, D.C. After they stop at the Mandan village, once the winter's over, they meet a French trapper, and with the help of his young wife, they are able to make their trip. Okay, 16-year-old girl named Sacagawea. She helps out a lot, especially with the native peoples. She knows the areas, she knows the tribes, and as a matter of fact, this young girl is pregnant. When a group of 45 men, all carrying weapons, comes into your area, the first thing you always assume is a war party, until they see the pregnant teenager with them. And just the simple fact of her presence is going to help alleviate the fears of many of these cultures that they encounter on the trip. If you're interested in Lewis and Clark's expedition, there is a 3-volume set of books. They're journals that are still published by Dover Press, with all of the facsimile drawings, the things that they couldn't pack up and send back to Washington. They took artists who would draw these plants and animals and specimens for later investigation. They reach the Pacific coast in 1805, they spend the winter, and then they come home. When they get home, they're heroes. They are hailed as heroes. and the United States of America is doubled in size. Now, the problems. The British and the French are still fighting. And the Indians are forming a confederation in the West, which could be a conflict for us. And just a few months before the election of 1804, our vice president kills our most important political enemy in a duel. You guys probably didn't hear that gunshot, but it was a gunshot. It's when the Vice President of the United States, Aaron Burr, challenges Alexander Hamilton to a duel, and Hamilton gets killed. Now, the reason for the duel is in the election of 1804, Aaron Burr realizes he will not be asked to be the second person on the Republican ticket. Why? Simply because he refused to concede to Jefferson. He became a rival of Jefferson, and so the Republicans see him as a persona non grata. He also has the reputation of being kind of a opportunistic. So he decides to go back to New York and run for governor of New York. Hamilton, who is also in New York, does not want Aaron Burr to become the governor of New York, and so Hamilton is going to start slandering him in print, the way Hamilton always does in these sort of political conflicts. Except this time he goes a step too far. He makes very lewd accusations about the relationship between Aaron Burr and his daughter, which at that point Alexander Hamilton had crossed the line. Burr believes this is what caused him to lose the governor's race, and because of these slanderous statements, he challenges Hamilton to a duel. In this duel, again, it depends on which biographer you're reading. Some people say that Hamilton shot his pistol off in the air just so that the duel could be over, and then Aaron Burr brought his pistol down and murdered him. Other sources say that the dueling pistols which Hamilton provided had one of the pistols had a trick trigger, and he accidentally shot his pistol off in the air, and then Aaron Burr shot him in the duel. Either way, Aaron Burr will be arrested repeatedly through the rest of his life, being charged with murder over and over and over and over again, each time being acquitted, since New York had no law against dueling on its books at that time. But now Alexander Hamilton is removed from the picture, and Aaron Burr will go on to other infamy. There's a really good biography about Aaron Burr called The Fallen Founder. If anybody's interested in Aaron Burr, it's a biography that doesn't paint him as some kind of superhero, and also doesn't paint him as some kind of supervillain. It paints him as sort of this opportunistic political person, like people normally are. Now, in 1790s, the United States did really well when England and France were at war, because we would sell to both sides. In 1803, both sides want to make sure that doesn't happen again. England is already upset with us when they find out about the $15 million that we've given to France. They impose trade restrictions on us, not allowing us to trade with the other party. In 1806, the British start enforcing those restrictions and more. They will start capturing American ships and forcing the sailors to serve in the British Navy. Okay? The Brits claim to be looking for English deserters who are working on these American ships. That is true. Many times when these British ships get close to the American coastline, some of these sailors will jump overboard and swim to shore and sign on with the next available merchant ship that's going out, because they no longer want to serve in the British Navy. So at times there are British deserters on these ships. Between 1807 and 1812, more than 2,500 Americans are captured by the British and forced into service into the British Navy. One incident is particularly bad, and this incident is going to demonstrate just how stubborn and stiff-necked Thomas Jefferson can be. Hold up. Okay. Good. It's called the Chesapeake Incident. Remember I told you that Jefferson had decreased the number of naval frigates we had down to 7. Well, the 7 naval frigates correspond to the 7 major ports, right? And so these frigates serve as sort of our coast guard, The Chesapeake, the frigate the Chesapeake, protects the Chesapeake Bay. In June 1807, the British claimed to be looking for deserters. And in fact, the captain knows there are British deserters on his ship. So when the British ship tells them to heave to and prepare to be boarded, the Chesapeake refuses to stop and tries to make it out into the open ocean where it can outrun the Leopard. When they refuse to stop, the British ship opens fire and kills 3 Americans while still in the Chesapeake Bay. So the British came into the bay and opened fire on an American ship. Thomas Jefferson is livid. The impressments were bad enough. Jefferson writes a manifesto to England demanding this, condemning this as an outrage, demanding an end to impressments. His aides recommend that he tone it down. Whoa, Thomas. Don't forget you decreased the size of the army down to 3,000 men, and we only have 7 frigates left. But he didn't care. This incident could not go unanswered. The Navy and the Army had already been downsized. Now, before the Chesapeake incident, Jefferson had convinced Congress to impose non-importation laws on specific British goods. We would force the British to have to concede to us before we would start importing their goods again. Well, it has a little bit of an impact. But now that they've attacked an American ship within our waters, Jefferson is passionately enraged. He pushes through the Congress something called the Embargo Act of 1807. It forbids Americans to trade with any foreign port, not just the English. Okay? He believed that the British needed us more than we needed them. You got to remember Jefferson's philosophy. Jefferson believed that true freedom was having an agrarian society where we produce our own wealth through what we grow, what we produce on the land. Okay? Jefferson believed that places like England and France and Spain and the Germanic territories and Italy, they need the resources that the Americans have. And so if we cut off trade with all foreign ports, not only will the British be suffering because they don't get to sell us their goods, plus they can't purchase our resources, but all of the other countries will put pressure on England to try to force them to concede to America's plans. This was a bad idea. 1790 to 1807, U.S. exports had increased 5-fold. And now to instantly stop, that was bad news. New England shipping industry just completely stops. There's nothing they can do. Tobacco rots on the docks in Virginia, and the middle states' wheat values will drop so drastically that it's not even worth it to go out and harvest your crops anymore. It's bad. The thing of it is, everybody realizes within that first year how bad it actually is, but Jefferson is so stubborn and so stiff-necked that he keeps this embargo in place until the very last day of his presidency. They try to amend the Embargo Act and he vetoes it. They'll bring this stuff to his desk and he refuses to relent. And so the election of 1808 happens, and from November all the way to March 1809, the Embargo Act stays in place. Jefferson is resolute that this will not go unanswered. So the Federalists are actually going to gain some political clout back during this period because of Jefferson and his stubbornness. In 1809, as soon as Jefferson's out of office, the Congress will replace the Embargo Act with the Non-Interaction Act of 1809, which says the United States will have no direct trade with England or France. Neither of the warring parties will be able to receive directly any of our goods and supplies. In 1808, Jefferson had asked if he would seek a third term, and he said no, he would follow George Washington's example and serve 2 terms and then return to his private plantation to return to whatever business he was doing. And so from this, Madison is going to run with Monroe as Republicans, and the Federalists are going to nominate Pinckney again. He does a little better this time, but he's not able to win. Jefferson's Embargo Act, as the last part of this section. Jefferson's Embargo Act really showed how stubborn and tenacious Jefferson was when he got an idea in his head. And it's, again, not until Madison is literally in office that they're able to orchestrate a new thing. They believed that as long as they could trade with the Spanish and the Italians and the Germans and all the other countries, if those people wanted to trade with the British and the French, then that was fine. But the idea was this Non-Interaction Act was going to put the pressure on both England and France to, number one, stop the impressments, and number two, stop seizing our ships. So when we come back, we'll start talking about Madison and the War of 1812.